I was like, I am not letting that happen to my hometown. Oh, hell no. I saw you guys do it to San Francisco. It's not happening here. I'm not going to be another beige square building. I will show you guys how it's done. One was the idea of doing a mural. A big part of it became over time the idea of supporting a local artist here. So my Octopus House is all local artists, almost all born and bred here, in fact. I don't think any of them came from anywhere else. And it is very much my love letter to Austin. The very front of the house was kind of, it had a gate on the top, so there's a little patio deck on the very top there. And it was barred so that I could kind of see people walking by, but they couldn't see me. One of the first things I did was have that ripped out because, I mean, it's Austin. You got to be able to say hello to your neighbors as they're going by. And it has functional purpose. I have a website, octopushouse.com. I'm not anywhere on the website, I don't think. The website there is to promote those artists. Promote those artists so they continue to do amazing work and keep Austin weird. The house is to keep Austin weird. It's a love letter, but that's the point of it, is to keep it weird and to encourage people to continue to do that, because otherwise you lose your character. I don't want Austin to be another Houston.
Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together. Although it's not the last time.
Joey, your reputation has preceded you with me as the owner of the Octopus House here in Austin, Texas, which is a famous institution. And then the first time I met you was actually at your house for an event you were co-hosting with a friend of mine. And something that was particularly impressed upon me is I walk in the door and you just greeted me like an old friend and gave me a hug in the most genuine way. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I was born here, and I became a hippie here in 1970. I was hanging out on the campus with my mom while she was working on her master's degree in library science, and I used to hang out with the hippies on the drag. And I discovered that they were just like me. Hippies are just very naive children that have grown past their useful state, right? And so, yeah, I've forever since then been just kind of a hippie looking to make a friend. And you were definitely pretty friendly, so it was easy to do.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I'm excited to walk through your story a little bit. Tell us about your origins here in Austin. What was upbringing, family like?
Yeah, so I was born here in Austin. My parents were both going to school at the time. I am a byproduct of there were no birth control pills back in that day. So my poor parents, who were trying to get through college education, all of a sudden had a kid on their hands. And they pushed through. My dad loved to say that he didn't ask for a penny from his parents, to kind of make it through. But it was tough, I know, for both of them kind of getting through that. I was born at St. David's up on 35, which is still kind of dear to me. I don't think I've been in the building since, but it's been a while. And we moved around a fair amount. My dad worked in the government. He worked for the Social Security Administration. So we kind of followed him around. My mom was a teacher. She got her degree in math. He got his degree in business. And we lived mostly down in South Texas. I grew up mostly in McAllen, Texas, down in the South. But every decade or so, I'd end up back here in Austin for a while. And when my parents broke up when I was 10, we moved back here to Austin for my mom to work on her master's. And that was the first time I was aware of Austin. I mean, when I was younger, not so much. But I went to elementary school at Travis Heights Elementary in Bolden Creek, and started really becoming kind of attached to Austin really at that point in a more visceral way. I always remember there was a little creek in the back of the elementary school, and the kids would all go play in the creek on our break, and they had crawdads in the creek. And I didn't know what they were, and they were scary to me, and other kids were like, crawdad, kind of stuff. But I definitely fell in love with it there. My mom was really busy. My dad was gone, and my mom was busy with school, so I got to explore Austin on my own. And it was back in the day where everyone was a latchkey, so I just got on my bike and explored as much of it as I could, and I could get anywhere around there. I remember we were high up on a hill just off of 35 in an apartment complex, and there was a convenience store down the hill from me, and I would ride down there in the summer for whatever reason. I was working on a book of fighter jets because I love fighter jets. I was building up this book, And they had a copy machine down there. So I'd ride my bicycle down there, make a couple of copies, ride back. Well, one day it was too hot, way too hot. I was barefoot because I'm a barefoot kind of guy. And I could, and the hill was too steep. And I always had to walk my way up that first hill. And I could not do it because my feet were burning too much, even for my tough feet. So eventually I crafted some shoes out of bags I found around and made my way back up that hill. But I had a lot of fun memories because I got to explore it by myself. I really got into the campus then because my mom was working on her master's. So I'd hang out at the undergraduate library on the UT campus. It was back in the day when the stacks, the deep libraries, were actually in the main building. So I got to go into the stacks with my mom when I was a kid, which was kind of like something out of a Harry Potter film. You know, everything's dusty and ancient. And I've always been a lover of knowledge. So to me, it was like being in Nirvana. They had all these tomes, you know, and very few people kind of had access to them. And that's really, I think, when I fell in love with it. You know, I'd go out on the campus and hang out with hippies. I've always been pretty literate, so I read the newspaper even as a kid. And when the hippies first came out, they were pretty scary to most people, you know, to the authorities in charge especially. And I'll never forget reading the Austin American Statesman when I was 10 years old, and it was this basically an attack article about the hippies and how dangerous they were. They actually claimed that the hippies were hiding munitions within the tie-dye clothes that they were selling out there. And even
like intentional and antagonizing kind of thing?
Yeah. And I was like, they're not doing that. Like, talk to them. No. So it definitely gave me a little bit of that question authority thing, even at a young age. And my mom finished up her degree. We ended up going back down to McAllen. She started a career there. But then as soon as I was ready to go off for college, I definitely had to go to UT. There were no other choices. And I had some pretty good choices. I had scholarships to MIT and Caltech, and, you know, I had good grades. But UT was like home to me. I'd already established a connection with it, you know. I ended up going there a year early in my junior year in high school. I realized I didn't really have anything left to take in my senior year, and I was watching the seniors just blow off and party. So I decided to skip my senior year basically and kind of come up early. But it made it unusual for me. I basically didn't know anybody. You know, I left my class behind, you know. So I was on my own, but it was very comfortable. And I love that. It really gave me kind of the spirit of this town to be a student, you know.
When you'd already covered a lot of ground on your bicycle. Yeah. Let me actually go back for a minute, Joey, to that first kind of falling in love with Austin.
Yeah.
Paint us a picture of the physical place, maybe institutions, places in the city you like. You mentioned libraries, and then paint us a picture of the culture at the time.
Yeah, and parts of that culture are still very much here. You know, people like to complain that the city's completely changed, but in Silker Park's the same. Barton Springs is the same. I grew up in those waters. You know, my mom would take me out there, and it was relatively inexpensive, but we couldn't afford the springs. Then you did the Barton Springs side.
Oh, yeah.
But we didn't have much money, but we could still go in because it was, I don't know, like a quarter, you know, or something like that. I was kind of shocked when I moved back, and it was like multiple dollars, you know. But Zilker was a big part of it for us, you know. I think they still do the plays out there, but we would go and we'd watch the plays on the stage out there. We'd spend the time in Barton. We'd take the little train that went around. I think that's the only thing that's changed is they upgraded the train a couple of years
ago. So does it run now? I only seen it
It's running again, yeah. They spent a couple of years with the train being down, but they brought a new train back, and it's really pretty. But I haven't had any kids to kind of be my beard to ride the little thing. I haven't gotten back on it yet, you know, but I'm looking forward to that. Flying kites out there to this day. It's one of my favorite places. When I go running, that's where I'm going to go, you know. I lost my wedding ring in Barton Springs a few years ago. I had a cousin out to visit me, and I was just, you know, it's very slippery water, you know. And I went and got, you know, like gear to try to find it, no luck, etc. And I was heartbroken. But then I finally came to terms with it, in part by realizing, well, this is the water I grew up in. If it was going to go anywhere, this is where it should land.
I love it.
And I got okay with it then, you know. But yeah, that was a big part of my growing up, was just that area, was just Zilker. Um, and it was accessible and it wasn't overrun. It was pretty easy. And not much of it has changed, you know. The topless side on the far side is still the topless side, you know. I have a really good friend that does laps in the morning topless.
Okay.
And I said, how does that go? She goes, well, I gotta be a little careful. Occasionally you get a creeper, someone who's not just cool, you know? But that was a big part of it. But it wasn't just that. It was just, Austin has a vibe when it comes to the people. So I lived in an apartment complex with my mom. I was 10 years old, and all those people just kind of took me in. There was a guy who was really into model cars and planes, and he would get them for me and help me with them. And there was a woman who had a player piano, and we'd all gather around her place in the evening and just enjoy each other's company and stuff. Austin, for me, has always felt more communal than pretty much any other place I've been.
I agree with you there.
Even more so than Portland and San Francisco. And they're pretty communal places too. But yeah, I mean, people feel comfortable here. They feel relaxed almost right away. This place lacks tension that a lot of other places have. And it's so remarkably unique for Texas. Nothing like any other place, you know.
What do you attribute that to, this being such a communal place?
I think part of it's just it being a college town. You know, college towns are always a little bit different. In a place like Houston, who's going to notice a college? It's like so big anyway. But my understanding is it's always been that way. It's always been completely different. So, for example, I enjoy sushi a lot. I really do. And I was talking to I talk to people about sushi in Austin because it breaks my rule, which is you don't eat sushi off a coast.
Yeah.
You want that fish coming straight in. You want to enjoy it. We're hours from a coast, and yet if you're getting sushi in Texas, you're gonna get it in Austin. We have the best sushi in Texas by far. It's not even close. So I'm talking to my mom about it, and she goes, oh yeah, my sister used to get sushi here back in the day. It's like, your older sister? She's like, yeah. When she went to college? Yeah. In the 50s? There's been sushi in Austin, Texas since the 50s, apparently.
Okay.
It's unreal. There have been some plane flying into this town every day for the last 75 years, bringing sushi to the people of Austin, Texas. Yeah.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get to be a beneficiary of that as well.
So I think part of it's college town, and the town was smaller, so the college used to be a big portion of it. We're 1 million now. We were 250,000 when I left 35 years ago. We're 150 back when my mom was going to school. So the town of 150, you got a school that's, 30,000. It's has a pretty big oversized influence on it. The north-south thing creates a dynamic that I haven't seen in any other towns here. It creates a polarity in this town that no other city has here. San Antonio's kind of circumscribed. Houston's a big mass. Dallas-Fort Worth, you got a little bit of a divide between those kind of two sides. But the sensibility between the north and the south here creates this dynamic that none of the other towns have. In fact, there's something I want to bring back. There used to be a tug-of-war.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I saw a video.
I actually have it on my to-do list to bring the tug-of-war back.
Oh my gosh, do it. I'm with you, Joey. Let's do it.
And you can tell almost immediately who's from where and how they behave and what they like.
Huh.
When I moved back here 5 years ago, I needed to buy a car. And I went up to the Roger Beasley in North Austin to buy a car. And I cash in hand, just ready to buy a car kind of thing. On very easy sale. And I was dressed like a hippie, like I am most days. And no one would talk to me.
Oh my God.
A salesman wouldn't even approach me. And they're just sitting around idling. They're like, not doing anything with their lives except missing out on an easy sale.
Yeah.
I went, like 15 minutes, dude. I just finally was like, all right, I'm out of here. And I was like, I know there's another one in town. And so I went to the one on the south side. Guy walked right up to me, made an easy sale, etc. We're doing the paperwork. And I was like, by the way, it's the same people. I said, I went to your north shop. They wouldn't even talk to me. And he said, oh, yeah, you're on the south side. I was like, oh, I'd forgotten. Wow. The judgment, the level of gentrification on the north versus the south side. I had a friend that took an Uber who doesn't drive around at all. He said, when he came to my house, he said, the moment I crossed the lake, I could tell the difference.
Wow.
I said, How so? He goes, it's a little bit more rough and ready over here, you know?
Do you still sense that today?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. You know, I know people that won't cross.
Oh my God.
There's an event center called the Concert Dome, which is kind of like a miniature sphere from Vegas. And they were on the south side over by the airport. And I went there 3 or 4 times with a bunch of friends. Well, they moved north. Everyone in my group was like, yeah, I'm never going again. So I think having
boundary lines.
Yeah. So it's not all about, homogeneity. I mean, I think having a little bit of friction really kind of helps define who and how you are, So I think that's part of it too. Yeah. And it's always been that way. My dad, when he got in the government force, the guy who was setting up where they were going to go, where they were going to be stationed, basically said, don't bother with choosing Austin. Everybody wants to go to Austin, Yeah. So it's been a long time coming, I mean, if you grew up in San Marcos or New Braunfels or somewhere like that, and you wanted to go have a party and you were of the right age, you came here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This show is supported by Loyal Home Concierge. You can take a company public, but you just found a scorpion in the guest room. Welcome to Austin. We'll handle it. LoyalHomeConcierge.com.
Let me go back, Joey, to something you just casually dropped earlier of having these amazing opportunities available to you for college. And I'm sensing kind of technical schools. What were you wanting at that time? And, what drove that decision? And what were you looking ahead to? I'm curious the formation that was happening in you as a young man.
I was always a nerd as only child. My mother was an academic, so I read a lot. I took a physics class in high school, and they had a terminal that went into the local university, which was at that time Pan American University, nowadays University of Texas at Edinburgh, I guess. And I was the first time I had access to a computer, and this was well before PCs, a few years before PCs happened. So the only access you had was there was a big mainframe or a mini computer somewhere, and basically it was all in the colleges. And I just identified with it immediately. I don't have a very good memory. I have a pretty bad memory. In fact, I always have. And so I've tended towards the sciences that are easier to remember, if you will. So I could never be a doctor. I remember, peers of mine doing organic chemistry in college, and I was like, oh God, I can't even remember the parts of the cell. Forget the full anatomy of the body. So I liked the computers because it felt like physics. It kind of boiled it down to a few simple elements that I could remember, and then I could kind of build those tinker toys up into larger buildings and stuff. And it was very simple. I learned BASIC back then, and I started learning how to code. So then once I got to school age, it was like, this is my jam. I might have been a mathematician. My mother was a mathematician. But she was a mathematician back in the day when you could make a living doing it. So she was an elementary school teacher. And then she had to go back to school to get something she could actually use. Nowadays, if you have a math degree, you can do pretty well. You can go work for one of the big AI companies and make some pretty good money. I still love math. It's a pure science. It's incredibly pure. But couldn't make any money doing it, and I watched my mom struggle with that. I remember one summer, we had the summers off together, which was great. We would travel somewhere around the United States. We didn't have any money, so we'd hop in our car and go somewhere. But one summer, I was looking through the house, and in the closet, she had a set of compasses, those old school drawing on a map thing. And she had a whole set of them, 16 of them. So I got them out and started playing around with them. She showed me a little bit, and I said, okay, but why do we have these here? Weren't they at the school? And she goes, well, there's no money in the school. I bought those. Those are ours. So in the summer, they kind of come home. And I was like, okay, I can't make a living doing that, obviously. So that's part of why I ended up in computers. Yeah.
Okay.
The other part of it for me was, I was an only child, but it was especially hard once my parents broke up because Dad was gone and I was kind of just on my own. And I used to watch Star Trek as a kid with my dad. And in the second year of the Star Trek TV show, the very first one, all of a sudden the ship could talk back to you. So it was a real computer. You talked to it, it talked back to you. And I remember thinking after my parents broke up, well, if I could do that, then I wouldn't be alone. I'd always have someone to talk to. And I think probably one of the impetuses for me getting into it to begin with was to try to solve that problem. In the interim years, I figured out how to make friends. That's actually the solution. The solution is not to have a computer that you're talking to. It's actually to meet people and be friendly with them. So I figured out a better solution to that one, but it was probably one of the original reasons I got into that. And then I just stuck with it. I didn't do very well at UT. I didn't have any study skills. You know, I found school really easy in South Texas. I was a top-notch student, straight A's, but I didn't work for it at all. Then I got to college. You actually had to study.
A little bit of a rude awakening.
But the other part for me, Austin, was that the cultural aspect. My education going to UT, I felt was more cultural than intellectual. You can pick up a book and read it and then learn about it. But growing up mostly in South Texas, I didn't have access to a variety of cultural concepts or ideas or influences. And so going to UT was mostly about meeting these people from all over the state and all over the nation and sometimes all over the world that had completely different perspectives about everything. And that's the part that blew me up, The educational stuff, I love that. I'm a nerd. I get it. But meeting all these people from different places with different ideas and kind of mixing it up with them, that was the beginning of my real education, I think. The access to the people,
What form and what shape did those friendships and communities take? Like, what were some of the rhythms of that?
What do you mean?
So, and I love that realization that you had as a young man of, there's this, talking voice on the spaceship, but really I can go out and make friends.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, maybe this was in college or beforehand. What are some of those memories you have of close, tight-knit friend groups that you formed, or these communities that you recently referenced of varying perspectives? Like, were these regular gatherings on the UT campus? Was this? It was having a one-off conversation.
It was almost all informal. I don't do a lot of formal stuff. It came in different ways and forms. So, for example, I lived in Jester Dormitory, which is the big dorm on campus on my freshman year, and it's right adjacent to the student dorm. And so you share certain facilities with football players, basically. And so I would run into them in the TV room or the lounge, getting snack foods and stuff. And those were interesting to me. My freshman year at UT, we had 3 just stunning players. We had Earl Campbell, who got the Heisman Trophy, Russell Ertzleben, who kicked the longest field goal of all time, and we had Lamb Jones, who had gotten a gold medal in the Olympics the year before. 3 of the most amazing human beings that you could possibly imagine as athletes. And they would sit there very humbly and just shoot the shit with me all day long. And it was a real insight into how people are, because they were the top tier. There's tiers below them. We went undefeated that year as a very good team. But those 3 actually stood out above all the other ones. And they were extremely friendly and open-hearted. The tier right below them, blustery, not friendly, showing off, carrying on. And like,
on their shoulder, maybe.
Well, these guys don't got anything to prove. These guys are still trying to prove themselves. The ones that don't have anything to prove, they're just being themselves. And so I got to see that, who's putting on airs, who's being authentic, who's okay with being themselves, who's not yet, and trying to get that kind of sense of how people are. It was a real life lesson for me, understanding that the very best people are actually kind of the most peaceful about where they're at, and open to engaging. They're not competing with you. They've already gotten there.
Yeah.
They can just have a conversation with you now without anything else in there. Conversations just on the campus one way or another. A lot of falderall too. Just having fun, making friends. Believe it or not, I went to school one summer and they were still somehow doing panty raids, which was actually my parents' generation, not my generation. But yeah, we went from our all guys dorm and ran over to some girls' dorm, and they threw panties out the windows. That was fun. A lot of it was just kind of event-driven too, or just kind of that time. I stayed at kinsolving one summer, which was a co-ed dorm. During the year, it was an all-women's dorm. So the people running it were women, and they were very kind of matriarchal about the whole thing. They really didn't like it that it was a co-ed dorm during the summer. And we had little P.O. boxes there, and I checked my mail one day, and there's a little slip, and everyone got this slip. And it was a complaint, basically, about how people were making out in the hallways, kissing. It wasn't really making out. People were just kissing, whatever. And it was a whole thing about how that was not okay, and blah, blah, blah. And at the very end, it was like, no PDA, with 7 exclamation marks. Well, PDA was not a common acronym at that time, at least not to me. I had to reread it several times until I just understood it was a public display of affection. It was 7 exclamation marks. It was really ardent kind of thing. And I wrote my one and only article into the campus newspaper, which made fun of the whole thing. I suggested that we hire ex-Nazis to monitor the halls for people showing affection towards one another, and stuff like that. So being in that period, the 60s and 70s were enormous transitions. So I think that drove a lot of that kind of sensibility around community and who was what. People were less about kind of everyone being the same. It was the beginning of people wanting to be different. You had the early 60s where everyone kind of did the same thing and looked the same and it was all the same. And then after a period of time, women wanted rights, blacks wanted rights, also people wanted rights, and we started having these divisions. So it was defining. It was a defining period. And a lot of what was happening was around that kind of practice of that definition. Other groups that I was in that were interesting were I got into the Mensa group at one point. Mensa is if you're in the top 2% of IQ. There's also a Sigma 4 group, which is if you're in the top 0.5%. And I thought, oh, well, that would be fun. I'll go hang out with smart people, No. Oh, God, no. Oh, God, no. As a group of people, they're very disturbed. And they have no social skills. It did me no good whatsoever, kind of doing that stuff. It was a very lively time to engage with people. And I think that it was almost the opposite of now. I feel like we're in such a divisive period now. And even though back then it was as divisive, late 60s, early 70s and stuff, it was still kind of a point for people to come together. I haven't quite seen that yet. This time around, if you will. The co-op on the UT campus is one of the best places to kind of build a culture. If you're out there, I remember my mom coming out to the campus and she was going to meet my college girlfriend, Betsy. And Betsy was very comfortable at the co-op. She was an alcoholic, and you could get cheap beer there. And we're sitting there, and she's getting a little anxious. And I was like, before my mom shows up, I was like, why are you anxious? She goes, I'm afraid that everyone and their dog's going to walk by and say, hi, Betsy, as I'm sitting here with your mom. Like I said, my mom drinks too. It's okay. Don't worry about it. But yeah, there were a lot of kind of places to do it, but a lot of it was just kind of free form. It wasn't organized, A lot of that was still kind of fomenting. And a lot of it was still being created, like Riverside. Riverside blew up while I was going to college. All those apartments out there on Riverside didn't even exist. And all of a sudden we started building them, and all of a sudden a quarter of the campus was living on Riverside, and there's a constant stream of buses going back and forth, Yeah.
You've referenced the culture of that era, and particularly prominent in Austin, of connection and unity, and contrasted that with more divisiveness now. What's your encouragement to the world in that regard of maybe getting back more to that connection and unity?
Yeah. Politicians use divisiveness to control. If they can get us fearing things, and then they can tell us that they have the solution to that fear, then that's how they get to be in office. We are not humans actually like that. We're just not. I've traveled some of the world, not a lot, but I'm here to tell you, everybody just wants to take care of their family and have some friends and be able to support their kids and want to hang out with their friends. It's not actually divisive in the real world. It's divisive in the news. It's divisive in the propaganda. It's divisive people telling us to hate somebody else. When my mother-in-law passed a couple years ago, but she really got into the MAGA movement at one point because her TV turned on to Fox News. It was just a kind of a default. And at some point she was in a conversation with my wife about these Mexicans, pejoratively used, these Mexicans or whatever. My wife was like, what are you talking about? She goes, yeah, it's on the news, you got these bad Mexicans, She's like, Mom, half your friends are Mexican. She goes, no, they're not. She goes, yeah. And she starts going through the names. Alvarez, Sanchez, and she grew up in L.A. Of course she had a lot of friends that were Mexican. But somehow the news had managed to convince this woman, who literally had a bunch of Mexican friends, that Mexicans were somehow not okay.
Wow.
This is a form of brainwashing, right? I mean, go anywhere in the world. People just want to be friendly, make friends. Some cultures are more insular than others, obviously, but mostly, once people get to know you, know that you have good intentions, they're pretty friendly. So I think it's driven by media, I think it's always easier to hate than to love, You got to be a little bit open-hearted to do that. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but we can push back. My house is an exercise in that. Yeah.
I'm excited to get to that in a little bit. And just going back to thinking about your college experience, like so rich and vibrant and enriching.
Yeah.
I want to revisit your identity during that time and what your desires were doing about life after college. Like you were being formed in a lot of ways through an incredible environment. What was that doing in you and where did that prompt you after?
You wouldn't take a Ferrari to a quick lube. So why are you managing your estate with a magnet on the fridge? Your home is an asset. Treat it with dignity. Loyal Home Concierge provides white glove stewardship for Austin's most discerning homes. Proactive care. Absolute discretion your investment deserves.
Looking at high school, you were a top student, you had all these doors opening, you had an inclination toward programming, and then you go to UT to find, oh man, this is a little bit more challenging academic environment, but had these just rich experiences all across the board, relationships, those connections with those top performing athletes, things going on culturally in the time. Were your desires changing about what you wanted your life to look like? And was your identity shifting? Where were you wanting to go?
It was opening up. I mean, since I was an only child and nerdy and kind of kept to myself and read books and everything, going to UT and having those people around me, it really awakened my desire to be within a social context. And it wasn't easy for me at first. I did learn to make friends, but it did take a while. I got bullied a lot as a kid, and I had to learn skills to actually combat that, which is you don't combat it. You just don't give them anything kind of back. But getting to know people, getting to know how they are and to interact with them became my actual juice. The coding thing was natural for me. I was good at that. And I enjoyed kind of doing that, but it's, I did consulting for about 15 years, where I just go out and do some work and then I move on to my next gig. And consulting in Silicon Valley is a little unusual. The way that the consulting companies are set up is there's a third party. I'm the programmer. There's some company like IBM that wants to hire me. In the middle, there's this broker company. Those broker companies have pairwise teams. They have a guy 100% of the time who's talking to IBM, and they have a cute little girl who's 100% of the time talking to the programmer. Because at this point, programmers are 99% males and mostly incels, before we had a word for that. I get this gig through this young woman. She's like 20, 21. She takes me out to lunch after I get the gig. And she says, we're getting to kind of know each other. Well, I was going through a divorce at the time, and it was a pretty bad divorce. And she starts getting this kind of look of concern on her face. I'm looking at her and like, oh, she's worried I'm going to like mess up this gig. Like she's obviously a new employee of this company. She's got her first assignment kind of thing. And she thinks that, this guy she just put in this position is going to mess it all up. And I look at her and said, am I your first placement? And she kind of hems and haws a little bit. And she goes, yeah. And I said, okay, so I'm going to tell you something now that's going to do good for you in your career. That's going to help you through all of it. Computers are a perfect world. It's like tic-tac-toe or chess. It's a zero-sum game. If you learn the rules, if you play the rules perfectly, you get a perfect result, 100%. 100%. You can actually win 100% of the time. It's a perfect universe. Life, nothing like that. Life is nothing like that. You're never in your life going to hit 100%. That's a nice goal to have. But if you're getting like 90% of your life, oh my God, you're killing it. But you're never going to get 100%. For computer nerds, the computer becomes this place that is safe. When a computer person's life turns to crap, they just go hide inside this computer box where they can get good results no matter what. I said, the fact that my personal life has turned to crap means that I'm going to go off now and do amazing coding for your client. You're going to have the happiest client of all time. She goes, you're kidding. I said, no, that's how it works. Fast forward a few years later, and I saw her 5 years later, and she goes, that's exactly what I needed in my career at that point.
Wow.
She goes, in fact, if I'm interviewing several people and one of them has a horrible life and a decent resume, I'm going to take that guy. But so I enjoy that. I kind of enjoy the perfection of it and stuff. But it is a zero-sum game. There's not a whole lot to actually get out of that at the end of the day. People are messier. They are more interesting. And it does take, honestly, a lot more skill to interact with a human being than it does a computer once you know what you're doing. There are no set rules. Who knows when someone says howdy if they mean it or not, and so that became kind of the transition point for me, was going to UT and really kind of feeling that. So it became less about me hiding inside the computer and more about using the computer as a mechanism to interact with other people. And then that was pretty much the defining characteristic of the rest of my career. I worked really well in teams and eventually became a leader and eventually ran large engineering organizations. But yeah, if not for that UT experience and that dynamic moment, it doesn't happen the rest of that, especially here. And it's one of the reasons I had to come back. When I retired, it was no question where I was going,
I want to give a reflection just about what you just shared, and then maybe we can riff on that coming back to Austin. But you talked about the world of computers being a controlled environment, less unknowns, a place of security, and then the human world, unknowns, ambiguity. And you strike me as a guy that really thrives in both. Like my initial picture of you, free-spirited guy, very comfortable in your own skin, gifted relationally. So you're a walker between two worlds.
Well, and I think it goes back to how people have a certain amount of social energy and not. We used to categorize people as either extroverts or introverts. I think everybody's some form of both those things. I require a fair amount of alone time, and I require a fair amount of social time, and there's got to be some balance between them. If I find myself doing social like several nights in a row, finally after a few nights, I'm like, yeah, no, I got to kind of be on my own for a little bit. And likewise, if I'm spending just a ton of time kind of on myself, I'm doing a big project now, I need to be careful not to just kind of get lost in it, because you can get lost in it in the world of computers. I've been up at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning where I need to go to the restroom. I need to take a shower. I need to eat. And I don't do any of that. You're just kind of lost, in that world. And I like the balance between those two. I'm comfortable with that. I no longer try to characterize myself as one or the other, because I do love them both. The isolation one versus the social one then also kind of breaks down into two different forms, in my opinion. One is one-on-one. And that's mostly where I live. I love the one-on-one, getting to know someone really personally and deeply, and having that dynamic between kind of two people. Once it moves into a group, it's a little bit different thing. It's a different dynamic. I'm comfortable kind of moving around in different pairwise groups or being in kind of like smaller groups and stuff. Once it gets up into large size, like that movie night that I do where I met you, there's 25 people in that room, right?
Yeah.
I'm like comfortable kind of like moving around in the room or kind of like being different like parts of it. But I'm not going to run that. Not if it's not my forte. Like Catherine is amazing at running that kind of thing. Likewise, I'm fine with, I've run engineering organizations, 30, 40 people. I can address 1,000 people about computers and be very comfortable about that. But that's that's more like you're preaching at that point. You're kind of giving the gospel, and it's unidirectional. It's no longer collaborative and engaging. I much prefer, even in that dynamic, having that kind of thing where you're kind of engaging with those other people, because I feel like you drop the meat off the bone when you just have people just listening and not just sitting there not doing anything, So there's a whole spectrum, I feel like, over on the social side there, and interesting kind of dynamics throughout all of that.
Well, I really appreciate the self-awareness you have there. We talk a lot about community on this show, and I think for a thriving community, many different roles are being played. Maybe some people are more the behind-the-scenes facilitator. Other people, maybe like you, are the one-on-one person engaging individually. Someone is the up in front, lead people through the talking head. So it's cool to hear that you have found really where you find a lot of enjoyment. You reference your delight in one-on-ones. And one of those one-on-one relationships I'm excited to talk about is your wife, who I've met, who's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about her.
So my wife's Denise Cooper. She's an amazing person. I met her originally at Apple. I was in a consulting gig there, and she was a new employee there. And I left that consulting gig. And then I guess a couple of years later, I had a friend in town, and I thought, oh, I think he'd really like her. So I kind of hit her back up. And when she and I had first met, we were either otherwise engaged. I was married, and she had a boyfriend. And I don't mess around. I am from Texas. We don't do that unless you're in a trailer park, maybe. And I saw her a couple of years later, and all of a sudden it was kind of like, oh God, game on. This one is something else. Fascinating human being. I study intelligence. That's my primary focus, is just trying to understand how intelligence works. And she and I are both relatively intelligent people. We measure well on IQ tests and all that kind of stuff, and kill on SATs and all those things. But her form of intelligence is radically different than mine. She's like a sponge. I am not. I am the anti-sponge. We like to say I'm slow, but I get there. So she'll just kind of absorb something, not necessarily know how it even works, but she will absorb it and then be able to do it, I'm the other thing. I have to actually understand all the nuts and all the bolts. I have to know exactly how everything works inside of that car before I push the pedal, kind of thing. I need to understand it at a really foundational kind of level. And she's the other way around. She's just like, suck it up, go on to the next thing. She serially acquires talents. So she knows more skills than any human being I've ever met. She's a certified Montessori school instructor. She's a certified massage therapist. She does every form of fiber arts that you can think of. She can take the hair off an animal and turn it into a coat, starting with the spinning wheel and then threading and then macrame. And then she can do, you name it. It's just unreal the more skills she has. She plays the mandolin in traditional Irish music. She told me yesterday that she is going to learn how to make a mandolin. So she has a friend that's a luthier in Dublin, and she's going to learn how to make that. So I came home one day, and she was reupholstering our dining room furniture. And I was like, what are you doing? She goes, I'm reupholstering the dining room furniture. And I said, you know how to do that? She goes, how hard could it be? It's a staple going in some textiles, Joey. Come on. How hard could it be? So She and I are antithetical in as much as I look at something and I feel a bit daunted by it. Her attitude always is, how hard could it be? How hard could it be? I used to tell her she should do a West Coast version of Martha Stewart called How Hard Could It Be? So less stuffy, every bit is kind of diverse. We used to watch Martha Stewart together because not only can Martha cook, she can actually use a drill too. She get her hardware out at some point and do that kind of stuff. My wife is named after a race car. Her name's not Denise, it's actually Denise, which is means Dutch. She's named after a race car because her father had a car shop and he raced cars. And there was a race car made for the Mille Italia, which is a 1,000-mile race in the Italian mountains. And her father purchased more, they only made a handful of cars to race in these mountain races because they had to be very special cars. And her father bought a race car that was an Alfa Romeo that was designed by Nardi and Denise. So that was on the front of that car. And so she used to race cars as a kid, which she told me about, but I didn't really believe her because my wife is the most careful driver I know. Incredibly careful driver, basically drives like grandma kind of thing, And so I really didn't believe her. She told these stories about racing as a kid, but she didn't really seem into it. I never saw her drive fast, and I'm a fast driver. Well, one day we're going out to visit some friends and they just repaved the road in Northern California. And it was just one of these beautiful swooping, turning like this, kind of going up into the hills. Just beautiful. And we both have Mazda Miatas. She's driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and they just repaved the roads. And she said, do you mind if I let it out? And in my head, I'm thinking, sure, grandma, but what I actually said was, of course. She proceeded to drive that, and we have identical cars. She proceeded to drive that car faster than I could possibly drive it. She scared the shit out of me, dude. Oh my God. Oh my God. I was just holding on for dear life. Wow. And we finally got to our friend's house, and we got there, and I unclawed myself from the handholds and stuff. And I was like, what the hell? She goes, I told you I could drive. I said, yeah, I've been with you 20 years. You never drove like that. She goes, well, my dad had a car shop. It was a body shop. I take care of cars. I'm not going to do something untoward that might harm the car. I was like, okay.
Wow.
One of the team building exercises they do in Silicon Valley, there are a bunch of different team building things you do with engineering teams, bowling, etc. But one of the big ones is go-kart racing. So every few years, she'd take her engineering team out for go-kart racing and humiliate them. And I'd be like, honey, that's not the point. The point is to build the team together, not to crush your engineers who already have no ego already, But yeah, she's quite the driver.
Love that hidden ability.
And she and I both helped each other in our careers a lot. I think we've been kind of a classic help each other out, build up each other's careers together, and I love to see that in couples. I love to see how they help each other out and reinforce one another. My wife was a CTO of Wikipedia. I was the VP of Chime. We both had amazing careers, and neither one of us gets there without the other. I got into startup life because she was on a board of open source initiative. She didn't know anything about computers until she met me, and so I was really able to help her with that. And I helped a lot that she was a sponge. She tells stories about going into meetings with execs and having questions, and then when she get out of the meeting, she'd call me up and go, what does this word mean? What does that mean? And I'd give her all that information. But she could take it and then run with it. And the complementary skills were really good for one another because I couldn't have been the CTO of Wikipedia. I didn't have the breadth that she did. She served in the Peace Corps. She has a master's degree in French literature. She's been around. She's had a much broader career than I did. They didn't want a CTO at Wikipedia that had just been in a room coding for the last 20 years, And likewise, what I did over on my side wasn't in her house either. I'd say she was probably more of a social engineer than me. She's studying in a conference, in a conference room, in the mixer kind of afterwards. She'll be the person that's like, oh, George, you need to talk to Susan over here because, by the way, George does this and Susan does this and you all need to talk. You all have a good time. And then she go find it. And she's a network hub. A few years ago, more than a few years ago, 10, 15 years ago, we were hanging out and she said, I hit the Facebook friend limit. I was like, you hit the Facebook friend limit? She goes, yeah. I have a limit? Yeah. Okay. What's the limit? 5,000. I said, oh, so there are 5,000 people you've met in your life that you know their name, you put them on Facebook. She goes, oh no, I know all those 5,000 people. I can tell you who they are, where they live, what's going on with their family, what's happening in their life.
Wow.
The normal human being has access to about 150 to 200 people. That's how we classify different species, is based on the group size that you can maintain. The reason that humans have the largest brains on the planet relative to our weight is because we have the largest social groups. It's not because we play chess or created differential equations. It's because you need a larger brain to support more connections between people.
Interesting.
So normal is 150 to 200. Mine is probably smaller than that. It's probably closer to 100. Hers is probably closer to 1,000, but the average is there around 200. So that's a large part of kind of what makes her. She also has more or less perfect memory. A few years ago, we were in Northern California and she had an appointment, multiple appointments kind of up north of us. I said, what are you up to? She goes, well, I'm getting an MRI. So you're getting an MRI? I'm kind of serious. Okay, what kind of MRI? I said, well, I'm getting a brain MRI. Okay. Where are you getting a brain MRI? I think I might have dementia. So, okay, so a couple of things. A, you don't have dementia. I know what that looks like a little bit. B, why do you think you have dementia? She says, well, I don't remember everything anymore. I was like, oh, honey, this is called getting old. But I can't imagine, I take notes to get by in my life, I have notes everywhere to kind of track my life. Short of that, I don't know what's happening, I can't imagine what it's like to have kind of perfect memory and never have to rely on that, She was always the note taker in the class when she was in school, So yeah, very, very different kinds of human beings. So it was very interesting over the years to try to kind of understand how she looks at things versus how I do.
What a beautiful compliment. And I love the way that you support and celebrate one another.
Oh, absolutely.
That's wonderful to hear about.
It took me a long time to convince her. I was actually turned on by her gravitas, not just her intellect, but her actual leadership. I was raised by a strong woman. I appreciate strong women. I like that. And I think you do have to celebrate it when it happens. I realized at some point in my career that women were starting to make it through the glass ceiling. But then I also realized that what I was mostly seeing when that happened was the woman would immediately seal the break in the ceiling so no other woman could get in.
Yeah, interesting.
And it was really disturbing to me. I wanted to talk to my mom about it. She's my model for an ardent feminist. And I had a hard time bringing it up with her because it felt like betrayal, And so I did bring it up with her, and she said, well, I hate to say it, but you're right. Whenever I found a knife in my back, it was usually another woman. I was like, oh my God. So I brought it up with Denise, and she made it a practice of fixing it. If she went to an event, she would literally go around to every single woman in the room, shake her hand, get to know her, making sure all boats rise. All boats rise. All the boats have to rise. That's one of the keys to actually creating the community, is the understanding that it's never about me getting above you. It's about bringing us all up together.
Yeah.
The guests are here. The balloonies are perfectly chilled. The outdoor heaters actually working. And I didn't do any of it. While I'm mingling, Loyal is ensuring the caviar is plated and the ice is fresh. Don't just host the party. Actually enjoy it. Loyal Home Concierge. We manage the vendors. You handle the compliments.
It's interesting you use those words. Like, that's how I describe the Austin business community. I feel that here as an entrepreneur is people are like, hey, a rising tide lifts all boats. Let's support one another. Yeah. Let's even, help our competitors. Like, I've been struck sometimes at just the way that mentality plays out here.
Yeah.
Joe, we got to get to the Octopus House. Like, tell us about this place. Why? How? Paint a picture for us.
So, the purchase of the house was interesting. Denise and I were looking around at different houses here. She lives in Ireland. I live here. So this was going to be my house. She left the first time Trump got elected. She's not a fan, which is why she's in Ireland. And we looked at a few different houses. It's interesting, when I first looked at that house, completely different, obviously, than the Octopus House now. It's a Japanese house. It was built by Annie Kim. She's a wonderful builder. She built it on spec and then looked for someone to buy it. And when we went and we visited the house, when we were coming out of it, I asked Denise what she thought about it. And she said, you relaxed in that house and you do not relax. I said, huh. And I had to think about it for a while. And it came back to that creek from my elementary school. I'm on the next creek over from it. There's a series of creeks that run basically from Ben White down into the lake. And East and West Boulding Creek, basically. And they do different branches and stuff. But basically, I'm one creek over from that creek. And my house, that Octopus House, is on the West Boulding Creek. And so I connected to it immediately. That's why it calmed me down. It felt like home again. And I remember afterwards asking the real estate agent, who's a friend of ours, why people settle down where they do. And she says it's oftentimes to kind of reconnect with something they loved from their youth, something that gave them that peace and that kind of connection. So I loved the house for its bricks, but I didn't actually care for the house culturally because it was Japanese. It was very insular. So the very front of the house was it had a gate on the top. So there's a little patio deck on the very top there. And it was barred so that I could kind of see people walking by, but they couldn't see me. One of the first things I did was have that ripped out because, it's awesome. You got to be able to say hello to your neighbors as they're going by. Having a porch, this is kind of like part of the deal. So I started kind of opening the house pretty quickly. I knew I wanted to do a mural. It's one of the things that makes Austin special and unique. I've seen other towns try to copy it a little bit, but it's something we've been doing here forever. And I've always wanted one. I love them. Every time I drive on Lamar Street between 2nd and 5th, I see all those murals as you kind of go under the overpass, and they're on both sides. And it does my heart good to see them everywhere. The one on the Lines Hotel building with like Wonder Woman and there's a female historical figure blended into that one as too. There's one of Tupac. They're all over town. And they're lovely. And, people take pictures of I love Austin, kind of stuff. But I believe that they bring character to it. I believe that it's a form of personalization that's not accessible in other parts of the world. I had a German gentleman outside my house a couple of months ago just carrying on about my house. And I chatted him up. And he says, fantastic. And we could never do this in Germany. I said, why not? He says, oh, no, they would never allow it. And so in a certain sense, I did it because I can. That's not something you can do, kind of everywhere. But I knew I wanted a mural. I knew I wanted something to give it some personality. I didn't intend it to draw attention per se. I just wanted it to be a reflection of how I feel like this town should be. That neighborhood that I live in, that's Bowden Creek. And we used to have a saying there, I don't hear it much anymore, which is you couldn't throw a rock without hitting an artist of some kind.
It's a creative hub.
Creative hub, musicians, it used to be affordable and we had a lot of musicians and artists of all kinds there. Less so, kind of nowadays. And so the other part of it is kind of historical. Denise and I had lived in San Francisco 20 years prior to me moving back here to Austin 5 years ago. And we had watched all the tech bros. I am tech, but I'm not a bro. We'd watched all the tech bros move from the South Bay and in the San Francisco Bay Area up to San Francisco. They'd finally figured out that San Francisco was cool. So they moved up to San Francisco. They brought all their money and no taste. And they started whitewashing that town. They drove the artist out because the artists couldn't afford it anymore. Denise and I had a lot of friends that got pushed out economically. And they had to go move to the East Bay or somewhere else where they could actually afford to live. And little by little, San Francisco lost a lot of its culture and its art. You know, it changed a lot. The people that were in there, the artists, all of it. When I moved back here 5 years ago, lo and behold, I started seeing the same thing. You know, once again, a bunch of tech girls moving in, big houses, no character at all, just big, gray, square, beige, you know, like, who's that? Okay, you're big and rich, we get it, but like, who are you? Who are you really, you know? And I was kind of pissed, honestly, dude. I mean, like, I was like, I am not letting that happen to my hometown. Oh, hell no. Like, it's all you guys do it to San Francisco. It's not happening here. I'm not going to be another beige square building. I will show you guys how it's done. Hopefully you guys will take some notice and maybe show some of your character too, you know? So there were multiple things kind of happening there. One was the idea of doing a mural. A big part of it became over time the idea of supporting a local artist here. So my Octopus House is all local artists, almost all born and bred here, in fact. I don't think any of them came from anywhere else. And it is very much my love letter to Austin. And it's has functional purpose. I have a website, octopushouse.com. I'm not anywhere on the website, I don't think. The website there is to promote those artists. Promote those artists so they continue to do amazing work and keep Austin weird. The house is to keep Austin weird. It's a love letter, but that's the point of it, is to keep it weird and to encourage people to continue to do that, because otherwise you lose your character. I don't want Austin to be another Houston. And in some ways, we're kind of heading there. Maybe more like a Dallas, actually. We're kind of heading towards Dallas in terms of cultural aspects. And so I want people to see that house and not just be excited about it, but excited enough about it to go, oh, wow, I want a mermaid in my front yard too. You know, how do I do that? Well, you go to the website and you find the person who did it here locally, and then you do it. So there are multiple influences kind of leading into it. My wife and I noticed that all of our properties are on water one way or another. So I'm on a creek in Ireland. She's on a lake. And our other property is in Maui, and it's in the middle of the ocean, where we definitely have an association with water. So I knew it was going to be kind of a water theme then. But there was another big influence to why it became a water theme. I moved into that house the day before snowpocalypse. And for those who don't know what snowpocalypse is, it was an entire week of below freezing temperatures in Austin, Texas, and I don't know that that's ever happened here.
Yeah, we're
ever.
We're not built for it.
So I moved into my very giant house. Nothing was in there except my master bed and a piece of art that my wife had put on the wall to welcome me to the house. And I don't know how to deal with freezing weather. I've never lived anywhere where it freezes, you know. Austin's as far north as I ever got in Texas in terms of living. So I moved into that house, and we had that big freeze. I kept the faucet running a little bit, you know, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know how my house worked. I just literally moved in the night it hit. And all I had was a mattress on the ground in my master bedroom. It was on the ground because the frame couldn't get to my house because it was starting to freeze. My truck was on the north side of Austin, and I was on the south. Couldn't get to me. And so I'm on this bed. I'm by myself. It's pandemic. I don't know anybody. I had a little bit of food in the house. And it got a little sketchy by the end of it, you know. We're out without power for days, completely quiet in the neighborhood, so weird. Except for one generator. Someone had a Jenny somewhere in the neighborhood. I was so jealous. It was a gas when I could hear it. I kind of wanted to just walk over and get warm, you know. So on the last day, on that Friday, it started getting above freezing again. I thought I was fine. I went down to my master bedroom around midnight and walked into water. I had standing water in my master bedroom in my completely new house.
Oh,
brand new floor.
Worse.
And it was flooding, and it was actively flooding. I pushed the master bed across the opposite floor. It was kind of coming out behind where the bed was. I spent that night trying to deal with the water. I had basically like that cup I was just like, there was a bail. Yeah, I'm trying to bail with, I had nothing in the house.
Wow.
So I had flood. I didn't know this my first home ever. I came into money late in my life, and I didn't know how to turn off the water or do anything like that. I'd been living in other people's houses, renting all my life. Finally, the next morning, I got a hold of my real estate agent. She told me about water cutoffs. I had to learn about that. I did some YouTubing, figured out how to turn the water off and stuff. So it destroyed the floor, of course. They had to rip out that floor. They had to rip out a lot of the walls to replace the floor. I had to move my large king-size bed somewhere, and it couldn't be on the floor, obviously, because they were ripping the floor out. So I slept for the first month in that house after snowpocalypse in my shower.
Wow.
Because I have an enormous shower, and the bed fit in the shower.
Oh my God.
And
That's
it's
a sight to see.
It's the only place I could fit the bed downstairs. I didn't know what else to do. So, I slept in my shower, afraid to death that it was going to turn on at some point. So they ripped out the floor. They replaced it. It was a lot. A few months later, we had a good storm, and it happened again. Historically, in Austin, we built postage-size houses on very large lots of land, and now we build very large houses on slightly bigger lots of land, and we don't know how to do water mitigation here. In places like San Francisco, where the houses abut, they've learned, years ago how to do that kind of thing, but we don't actually know how to do it here very well. We use people that do roofing to do our water mitigation here because it's the closest thing that we have. So, I'm on my 4th floor in that master bedroom. I had it flooded 3 different times the first year that I lived there.
Oh my gosh.
So while I'm thinking about what kind of theme for my mural, I'm getting flooded out repeatedly. I'm like, yeah, obviously it's going to be a water theme. And that's an interesting tale too, how we deal with water in America is very different than the rest of the world because we're a pretty young country, Years ago, I did a gondola ride in Lake Merritt in Oakland with my wife. She arranged this, and we had a 3rd-generation gondolier from Venice as our gondolier that day. And he was working on a graduate degree in water rights at Cal Berkeley at the time. So we had a very nice discussion with him about how Americans deal with water versus the rest of the world. And he goes, "Oh, you're very early in the States. You guys are still trying to fight."
Little pat on the head.
Yeah, like, "Oh, you think you can throw up a wall?" Yeah, you think it says, "Well, we're well past that. We understand you have to work. You have to work with the water. You can't just push it off and fight it. You have to engage with it, And so I remembered that. I remembered having that conversation with that guy. I was like, "All right, well, I'm not going to fight the water anymore. I'm going to work with it." I've always loved aquariums. So almost immediately I thought, okay, I want kind of an aquarium theme. I want a water aquarium theme. And I started thinking about different, fish and animals in it. The house had a very masculine energy to it. And the house was very square and beige. And from a high level artistic viewpoint, I'm no artist, but I did the overall concept for the house. I wanted it to be more female energy, not so masculine. I wanted it to be a square, less 90-degree angles, and I definitely didn't want it to be beige. And so I started thinking about kind of different animals that could help me with that. And I really struggled with how do I turn this from a square house to something that's not square? And then I finally came across the octopus. And then it was like, oh, that's the one. I can overlay it over the top of the house. It's going to give curves to it. It's a very intelligent being. Since I do study intelligence, that's my research subject. Their form of intelligence is profound and completely different than ours. Once again, like my wife and I, Homo sapiens and octopi are very different. And they have a brain for each one of their tentacles. And then they have kind of a master brain, and they all talk to one another and stuff. So intellectually, they're really interesting creatures too. The octopus that's on my house, just to be really clear, the house belongs to the octopus.
Ah.
I am the pet of the octopus. I lived in the octopus's house.
Let the deed and the records reflect.
But it does belong to the octopus. That the particular octopus that has that house is a female octopus, and it's a very special female octopus. Octopi die when they give birth, because they will eat their young otherwise.
Wow.
So they either die naturally, just kind of biologically, they kind of die, or they commit suicide.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a grim thing that they do. But the octopus that has my house is able to give birth and live on. It's special in this regard.
I love that. I love that. Well, man, I'm so grateful for the presence of your home in Austin, and just the fact that this is your love letter to Austin, and you're such an amazing cultural ambassador of this place. And it's fun to hear about your early roots and your childhood days, and grabbing the crawdads out of the creek, and then you come back to a different leg of Bolden Creek. Yeah, I'm grateful for that story.
It's surprising to me how much attention it's gotten. I have a treadmill on the top floor so I can see out to the street from there. And I was just running one day and I looked over my shoulder and there's like 20 people on e-bikes. So there's a
Perfect tour.
Yeah, there's a weird Houses of Austin bike tour that goes by my house all the time. And I was like, oh, okay, hi. I built it to be my love letter Austin. I didn't anticipate how many people would be coming by the house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, to our listeners, if you pass by, wave to Joey if he's on his treadmill, and be sure to send some warm hellos.
And if they really do want a tour, I am Austin friendly. Walk up to the door and knock. And if I'm around, I'm happy to give you a show.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, as we wind down today, Joey, give us maybe a place in Austin that's delighting you recently.
Oh, a place in Austin that's delighting me recently. I was going to say that Concert Dome until they moved to the north side of LA. I'm a foodie. I love the restaurant scene here. When I moved back here from San Francisco, I was like, oh no, because when I left before, it was just barbecue and Tex-Mex. So I love the food scene here. I every single week I'm going out to some new kind of amazing place. Some small, some not. I love the fine dining scene, but I just love the food truck scene here. For me, a great day is going over to Radio, which is one of the food truck areas. They got 2 of them on the south side. Maybe a little bit of live music, meeting some interesting people, having a good taco, and just to be looking to make another friend. And I can definitely do that at Radio. It's a great hang. It's just a nice place to hang out and meet people. Yeah.
Well, I think you're inspiring me for maybe my Saturday plans.
There you go.
Well, Joey, thank you so much for the time today. Really a pleasure catching up with you and getting to know you and getting to know your identity as a cultural ambassador here in Austin.
Thanks so much, Austin. I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together. If this conversation sparked something in you, a new idea, a feeling of connection, or just a good laugh, pass it on. Share this episode with a fellow Austinite or a loved one who needs to hear it. Let's keep weaving this fabric of community together. This show is proudly presented by Loyal Home Concierge. At Loyal, we believe that a healthy, thriving city starts within the 4 walls of your home. We are passionate about supporting overextended executives, the moms and dads who do it all, and the couples who take life by storm. Because we know that when your home life is supported, you are free to support the ones who matter most.
Your kids, your wife.
Whether you need a proactive manager for your home or a creative problem solver for your next big adventure, we are here to help you design a life of intention. LoyalHomeConcierge.com. Let's make life a little more beautiful together. Stay loyal to your community, and we'll see you next time.